I've made a little more progress with this entry into the article. And one of the things I did was use the typography to give a little more impact to that title. This is the kind of image that it does want to be full page, full spread, but I'm using it a little differently than it was originally intended. But I can still take advantage of that, and using the type even across the spread is definitely helping. When we do that, of course, we want to be mindful of the gutter, and this is a little close. I'm not too concerned about it, but if it was actually going to print in a magazine, I'd want to be sure of the thickness of the magazine. If it was maybe 24 pages thick, this would be fine. If it was exceeding 48, for example, the rounding of the gutter may be something to be concerned about. But for now, I can get away with it. When we're doing like an editorial entry like this, that is really a spread that is typographic and image heavy, we can break the grid a little bit. We have some flexibility because we're not really working strictly within the bounds of any body content. But I want to point out a few things that we can watch for in situations like this, and just some smaller technical aspects of the typography that we'll come across in various aspects of laying out a magazine. So what I did, made the title a little larger. I'm not convinced it's the right solution because it does have a colon down at the right end here, and it's alluding to Ford's River Rouge, the smaller part of the title there, which is again back over on the left side of the spread. But I'm not going to worry too much about that. I want to get to laying out the content that's around it. And I'm always trying to create unity in the layout. Whenever we can, we're looking for where we can establish that unity. So once we've got some type and we have the image, and then we have even the introductory line here, we want to make sure that we're tying those things together as much as possible. Sometimes that's going to happen through linear aspects of the image and the content playing off of, and other times it's going to we're going to require some background. We're going to use white space or even eliminate white space if there's too much. So a couple things I want to point out here is, in this one, there's a lot of white space, and it is, color-wise, it is a lot of white. I do like the way the layout's progressing, and I like the way the type is working with the image. There's some good alignment happening. So I want to refine this, but I do want to kind of mute this large area of white space. So what I'm going to do is bring in just a little bit of a background on that. I'm going to go to my shape tool. I'll go out to my bleed because I'm going to bleed that all the way out. And I'm just going to, with my eyedropper, I'm going to sample a color from within the image. And I'm not going to go dark. I'm actually going to maintain that lightness around the image because I want the impact, the emphasis to be on the typography, the main title, and the image. So sample just this yellow from the building in the image. And then I'm going to send this to the back. I use the key command all the time, Command Shift in my square brackets, but I'll just right click here and use Arrange, and I'll send that to the back. Make sure that it's aligned with the proper top of the image there. And you want to really zoom in and make sure that that's truly aligned. I have the guides here, so it's snapping to the guides. But if it was slightly off, even like that, we may not notice when we're zoomed out a fair bit, but when it prints, you do notice something like that. So we just want to make sure that when we've got a little bit of overlap, that those are actually lining up. And it is good to have some overlap. You can go right to the guide and it's likely going to be fine when it prints, but sometimes if you're just not sure of the snap on your software, I tend to do a little bit of an overlap there. And I'm just going to reset that just a bit. Now that's a little bit heavy, so I actually want to get that effect, that feel, but go a little lighter. So I'm just going to select that. And in this case, because I'm not dependent on a specific color swatch. This isn't a Pantone color. This isn't a color that is part of a set palette. I could probably find a lighter version of it in there, but I'm just going to go to the opacity in this case. This is an instance where I can use the opacity safely, and it also allows me to adjust. I'm not just trying to set different colors and see how they're working. In this case, I can really just see what's going to suit it best. So I'm just pulling back a bit on that heavy white area that's around the image, and I'm sort of grounding this content, giving it a container to sit within. I'll go a little lighter on that, but 60% seems good. So now I want to find the areas where I can really refine this and move on into my content. I've got alignment going on over here with the headline aligning with that part of the building, and I have some alignment with the intro here aligning with the building, but there's a couple of tie-ins that I really want to be sure of. When we look at this building, it really is this point right here where the shadow kind of comes to that point. That seems to be the alignment point, and that also lines up with the kind of second horizon that's been created in this image. So I want to move this over to just assure myself that that really is kind of finding its own baseline in this case. So I'm going to move that down just a bit, and then I'll put it back over here, and I'm going to refine this in a moment. So I'm really kind of looking for those areas where I can find that true alignment in the image and play my type off of it. The other thing with this is that there's a hyphen in that intro. And in content, when we actually have a lot of content and it gets into columns and so on, we are possibly going to need hyphens in order to resolve the justification concerns that we run into. But in titling and in larger type and in pull quotes, we definitely want to eliminate the hyphenation. So I can click on this and I can open up my paragraph panel. So I'll just go to Window, Types and Tables, and Paragraph. And I can actually turn off the hyphenation. In that paragraph panel, I can deselect hyphenate and it will remove that. So what it's saying is it's no longer allowed to hyphenate. And it's a very minor thing, but the hyphenation in copy, hyphenation is really to accommodate space and justification. It's something that we should otherwise eliminate. So now I'll see how this is lining up, and I'm really looking at this line here, the tops of the buildings. I know I have the horizon line of the field there, but I'm going to do something there to create a tie-in. So this is landing pretty good, the way this paragraph is landing between the corner of the building there and the tops of the buildings here. It's giving it some alignment, some unity with the image. It's also allowing that line where the water's been brought into the sky to sort of lead our eye into that intro. So that's working quite nicely. Now what I want to do is give it just a little more tie-in with the title and the image. One thing I'm noticing on the title though, and you'll notice I keep switching back and forth with the W between working and presentation mode, because it really is getting pretty busy with all these guides. I can of course do command and semicolon to turn off those guides. That's either one is fine. This does keep me in the working mode, which is probably wise since I keep switching back and forth. But I'm noticing in my headline a little bit of issue with the alignment, and that's the alignment on the end of the left end of the headline, and it's mainly caused by the negative space within that W there. The W is angling inward, so this is negative space that throws things out of optical alignment. They don't quite look aligned. And there's a great solution in InDesign for that. Sometimes it doesn't work, but usually it's pretty good, and it's excellent in body copy as well. And that's called optical alignment, setting the optical alignment. So I'm just going to go back into working mode. I'll double click into this content, select all, and I'm going to go to type and story. And in there is an optical alignment setting. And I can click that, and you can see it moved. I'll click it off, and I'll click it back on. You can see it moved that content a little bit. And really what it's doing is making its best guess at compensation for that negative space. And that's not bad. That worked pretty well. When we take a quick glance at it, it might need to come over a bit, but I think that's actually pretty good. So that's sitting well. It hasn't affected what's going on at the gutter here. Again, we are kind of close, but not too much of a concern. Now I really want to focus on this area and clean this up. Wherever I can get that unity between this part of the layout, the image base, and the title, I'm going to do that. So here, the image isn't going to be affected if I pull this frame in a little bit more to align with the edge of the E. So I'm going to get it just aligned to that side of the E. I'll pull this back in. And then I'm going to align my intro to the edge of the P, to the left side of the P there. And just see how that looks as a tie-in. So although we're breaking the guide a bit, you can see we're going out of the guide. The grids and guides here really are pertaining to body copy. If we had body copy on this page that all of this would have to be interacting with, that spatial ratio that the grids and guides are creating would come into really more of an effect, and we'd have to play within it. But when we're looking at this spread, we're not going to be seeing any body copy. I'll be putting all body copy on the next pages, the following pages, so I don't have to worry about that, and I get to break the grid. The most important thing is getting that unity across this whole entry into the article. So for the most part, that looks pretty good. That aligns well. I'm kind of just eyeballing it and seeing if it's optically aligned, and I'm quite happy with it. And one thing with this, I've got the dark blue there, and I have like 100% black on this entry. I'm not totally convinced with this typeface here. I think I could probably do a better choice of type. If I went to the same typeface that I have the headline in, it might be a bit too much. So I'm not going to worry too much about that at the moment, but it's probably something I would play with if I was to take more time. So I do want to just mute this black a little. I can highlight it and try finding a color within the article that may work. I've got a lot of blue. I don't know that I want to pull any more blue out of the image. So I'm going to see over here if I just have a darker version of this sort of yellow, and I might even go to almost a brown. I'll see what that looks like. And that seems pretty close. It creates a little more of a tie-in with the image, and it lends some more emphasis to the headline. I'm going to just see again if I can get a little darker. That might be good there. So I'm just looking for those parts in the image where I can sort of reflect what's happening in the background, but set the type into that background a little bit. So now I've got that unity with the title. The title is unified with the edge of the image. The title is also unified with the content of the image, and the intro is unified with the content of the image as well. And one final thing I want to do, just to bring a little bit of grounding to this intro and an additional tie-in with the image, is I'm going to add a rule. In this case, that rule is not going to be in copy, which means it's not going to be actually activated as a rule in the paragraph, a formal in copy rule. I'm just going to basically be drawing a box, but we refer to these as a rule. It's going to be a line, a box, you can call it what you want, but what I'm going to do is play it off that horizon line. So I have one final really clear tie-in to the article. So I'll take the rectangle tool here, and I'm going to go back into working mode just to find that edge of the frame. And I'm just going to draw the box across. I'm not going to do any measure of it right now. I'll go back to my presentation mode for a moment. So I want to get that colored. I'm going to color it the same as that type. So that's where I can use my eyedropper again and just sample that color. That gives it a fill. We want to make sure we don't have a stroke on that. And then now I can start adjusting it. It's of course a little heavy here, and I'm going to see how it looks pretty much the exact width of that, what looks like a fence in the image, in the distance there. And that may be a little light to ground this, and it may be a little long, it may be a little short. So what we want to do is really test, how is that looking? We want to kind of go back into that presentation mode and just see, is it hindering from the unity or is it helping? I think thickness wise, how high it is, how thick it is, in accordance with that fence is pretty good. That seems to be working well. It's aligned, left aligned with the type, and the way the type is landing with the top of that building with that image, that's good. So the spacing is fine, but I do think it's a little long. The nature of this paragraph is so that it's sweeping down to the left, and that's helpful with the unity between this content and the image. So I'm going to emphasize that with how long I make this rule. So I'm going to go back down into it. I'm really just zooming in onto it so I can get the center handle of this box, the right side, and I'm going to bring it in, and I'm going to line it actually with the O. Remember, an O has a counter, that round edge there. So we want it to overhang the alignment. We don't want to go right to the edge of the O. We want to go in a bit. And sometimes, this may be extremely particular for something when we're not really zoomed in as we look at it, if it was in hand. But we'll zoom out and we'll see how that looks. And I could probably actually go a little shorter because there's a line sort of being formed and I can play off of that. So I'm actually going to see how it goes if I'm down around century here. And I'm going to see even going between the two, that might work. This is a little odd because the Y is creating some negative space. So I'll see how that feels. If you go too short, it doesn't really work anymore. So I think that's good. That's pretty good. I can even try a little shorter to align with where the angle of that I is going to land, or that Y is going to land. It's going to take our eye down to about here. So I can do that. I don't want to go any shorter, but I'm going to see how that works when I zoom out. And that's not bad. That's actually a really good grounding of that. It's a very small thing. It's a design element, but it's also aiding in the unity. It's doing a few things. It's unifying with the image. It's bringing that line of the image out into the content area, and it's grounding this content. So it's, the content doesn't seem like it's floating in that space. It actually has some grounding, much based on the unity between the rule and the image. And it's emphasizing that directional cue, that sort of visual flow back into the image. So overall, this is actually working quite well now. And I think we can move on into the interior content.